So I'm Stephanie. I am a small business owner here on the Cape. I am a Cape Cod and Bike Fit based out of Marston's Mill. And I'll tell you a little bit about me. I am passionate about helping Cape Codders stay active through physical therapy, injury prevention, and bike fitting. And I'll tell you a little bit more about bike fitting in just a minute. I have a few other logos up here that I want to talk about briefly. The one down in the bottom left is Cape Cod Active Women. This is a Facebook group that I run, free to join, and I organize a few events each month for women to get together and have fun. We do all sorts of things: biking, hiking, rock climbing, kayaking. The list goes on. So if you are not already a member, feel free to join us. And the other thing listed on here is We Can. This is a local nonprofit that I love to support, and I am helping to lead a charity bike team that raises money for We Can. So the photo on this slide is actually, I believe, 2 years ago after a charity ride for We Can. And basically, we are training for a big ride in September. It's formerly the Last Gasp. Now it's called the Second Summer Cycle. There are 30, 60, and 100-mile routes. So you can kind of choose your adventure. And we do training rides throughout the summer to get you ready. So if you are feeling like you'd like to join the team and help support this great cause, I'd be happy to talk to you about that opportunity. So not a lot of people know what bike fitting is, so I'll just touch really briefly on that. Basically, a bike fit is a modification of your current bike setup so that your bike fits your body. And what I do is I have clients bring their bike to my office. I do an assessment of mobility, flexibility, in some cases strength, and then I can manipulate the various pieces on your bicycle to match up with those things. So if you aren't flexible, there are definitely certain things that need to change about your bike setup to accommodate that. And I do that for all levels of cyclists, from folks who like to cruise on the rail trail to folks who are climbing mountain watching. So there's a fit for everyone. And just because you may have had a bike fit in the past doesn't mean that's your bike fit for life. So the recommendation is to get an updated fit every year or two. If you are more of a casual rider, maybe you go 3 years or so. Certainly, if you are not comfortable on your bike, that is a perfect time to get a bike fit. There's a misconception that biking is just a little uncomfortable, and that actually isn't true. If your bike is fit well to you, you should really enjoy riding and not be limited by pain. That's bike fitting in a nutshell. So I just want to touch briefly on some of the things I talked about in the last talk I did. So required equipment to safely ride your bike. First one is a helmet. It doesn't matter if you're going a mile or 100 miles. Helmet is so important. You never know when something's going to happen, and you want to protect your best asset. And the other important thing is you want your helmet to fit you well. You don't want it to be too loose. Obviously, you don't want it to be too tight, but I prefer that. To make sure that your helmet is fitting you well, you want no more than 2 fingers between the strap and your chin. If you put your hand on top of your helmet on your head, you shouldn't really have any movement there. Another important thing that sometimes folks don't think about is to have some kind of identification on you and an emergency contact listed. A lot of folks wear the road ID bracelets that have all that information right on your wrist. At least have an ID in your pocket or something like that, so that if you aren't able to speak for yourself, someone knows who to call. Other safety things: a flashing tail light. Really important. Doesn't matter if it's day or night. You want to be as visible as possible. Bring some water with you, and then a very basic bike item to have is a bike tire pump. I'll get into that a little bit more later in the presentation. So additional equipment It's really helpful to have a flat kit, and we'll go through what that is and how to use it a little bit later. Bike chain move, and that's another thing we'll go over in this presentation today. I would also say a front light is really important, so that if cars coming behind you or in front of you, they can see you. Bike specific clothing. So in the last lecture, we talked about the importance of bike shorts, and visibility of your clothing. So if you're wearing, a jacket or a shirt that is a bright color, you'll be more visible to cars as opposed to if you're wearing all black and it's a shadowy day. And then the other thing is bike gloves. They protect you if you were to have a little bit of a fall, protect your skin, and also dampens some of the road vibration on your handlebars. So bike gloves are also important. Basic rules of the road. When you're on your bike, essentially you're a car. So you need to obey all those traffic laws. Use hand signals to not only tell cars around you, but also other bikes what you are doing. On the next slide, I will have all those hand signals for you. And then announce when you're passing pedestrians and cyclists. This is true on the road or on the trail. You just don't want to surprise anyone. So it can be that you verbalize that you're passing on someone's left, or you can have a bell or a little horn or whatever you need to do, but you don't want to sneak up on anyone. And then ride in the same direction of traffic. So these are the hand signals. Pretty standard: left turn, bring your arm out to the left; right turn. There are two options there. I prefer to just bring my arm out to the right to let people know what I'm doing. To stop, you're just bringing your arm behind you. If you're slowing down, you're kind of moving your hand a little bit. And these are really, the last two are really more important if you're riding in a group with a few other bikes so that they know what you're doing. But definitely the turn signals are helpful for cars. So that covers our review of the material we covered in the last session. So now we'll get on to some basic bike maintenance. So before every ride, I do an ABC check. So I check the air in my tires. I check to make sure that my brakes are working, and I make sure that my chain is adequately lubricated. And when we do the demonstration, I'll show you a quick ABC check. But if those three things are in good working order, then that's a good first step to get you ready to ride. Monthly maintenance, cleaning your bike, especially living on the Cape. We live on a sandbar. There's sand, salt, all sorts of stuff that is really not great for your bike. So a lot of people get a little nervous about cleaning your bike, but you can actually take your garden hose to your bike and wash it like you would a car. There are a few things you want to be mindful of. So you can see in the photo here, the hose is set to a wide spray area. You don't want to have the most aggressive spray on your hose. You want it to be broad because you don't want to force water into any of the components. You just want to rinse the outside. And you can use dish soap. You can buy bike specific soaps. There are all sorts of options. Dish soap is great because it'll break down any grease on your bike. When you're washing your bike, just make sure that after you rinse the soap off, you towel it dry, and make sure you lubricate your chain again after that. You don't want to leave your chain dry because then you can get some superficial rust on it. Another thing to do monthly is check the tightness of the bolts on your bike. Things do loosen up over time. So just taking an Allen wrench and just making sure that nothing's really loose or free spinning. If you are a cyclist who clips into your pedals, it's really important to check the tightness of your cleats. So those are the parts that interface on the bottom of those shoes. Those will definitely loosen up. And if they get too loose, you may have trouble flipping in or out of your bike. Dangerous situation. Other important things to check at least monthly would be tire wear. So if your tires are worn out, they'll be almost square, so they'll be flat, and then you'll see a definition between the flat surface and the sides. And then the other thing is brake wear. So depending on your style of brakes, you can visually see the different wear indicators, but also chances are you can feel when your brakes are worn out, they're dried out, you'll just feel like you're not stopping as quickly as you like. And if any of these things are a question mark for you, just roll your bike into a local bike shop and they will check all these parameters out for you. Tire pressure. So I check my tire pressure before each and every ride. Doesn't matter if I'm riding 2 days in a row. And I ride a road style bike, so it's a high pressure tire. And they lose air overnight. If you are riding a bike that has a lower pressure tire, maybe you don't need to be checking it every day. I would at least check it once a week. And there are a few ways to do that. You can get a handheld pressure gauge, or depending on your bike pump, you can just hook up your bike pump, and if it has that gauge on it, you'll see what your tire pressure is. To determine what your tire pressure should be, there should be a pressure rating on the sidewall of your tire. Nowadays, folks are going toward the lower end of what that pressure range is. Back when I started riding about 15 years ago, the thought was you pump those tires up as high as you possibly can. And now actually, after a lot of studies, they're finding that it's actually a lot better to be on the lower side. It's more comfortable and it's more efficient. If you want to take a really deep dive into what the perfect tire pressure is, there are online calculators that will measure the weight of your bike, the weight of you, the temperature outside, and it'll tell you exactly how much tire pressure to put in your tires. Personally, I don't go there. I just want my bike to work. So I stick with staying within that range, and I'm happy with that. And then the how and when we just went over. So how, handheld pressure gauge or your bike pump, when I do it every ride. So flat kit. So flat kit is this is my flat kit. It sits right under my seat on my bike. I have my light attached to it since it's off season. I don't know if it is charged. Oh, it is. So I have different settings so it can really make me visible to people. This is a rechargeable light. I don't worry about batteries. I plug it right into the wall. So they make all different styles. This is part of your safety kit. So anyway, this is my flat kit. Inside, I have 2 tire levers. So those are these little plastic things. You can get by with 1, but 2 makes your life a lot easier. It doesn't want to take up more space because they nest together in most cases. A spare tube, so make sure you have the tube that is appropriate for your bike. If you are not sure about that, again, you can use the parameters of your tire, or go into your local bike shop and they can help you with that. I also carry with me a CO2 cartridge, and an adapter. So basically, if I am having to put air in my tire, this is compressed air. So I just put these 2 things together and put this on my tire. And once this is punctured, that will put enough air in my tire for me to get wherever I need to go. If you don't want to go this route, you can also just get a frame mounted pump. A lot of folks prefer that. It's an easy thing to do. The other thing that I carry with me is a multi-tool. Just this little piece here. It has all the different things I'd need to adjust pretty much anything on my bike. So I keep that, and this would be good to do your monthly check of the tightness of all of your bolts. And then the other thing on the list here is a patch, which I don't carry a patch with me. If there's any doubt about the integrity of my tire or my tube. I'll replace the tube, and in a pinch, it's not officially recommended, but in a pinch you can actually use like a dollar bill as a patch to get you a short distance. So you just fold it up and put it inside your tire, wherever, if you have like a slit in your tire, and that will just prevent your tube from pushing through that little cut in the tire. Obviously, you can't do that if you have a big cut in your tire. But so that's my flat kit. It goes with me everywhere, and it has all the vital tools that you need if you were in a pinch. So we'll get into some demonstrations here. So chain care. See, I knew I was going to show you. So I am diligent about making sure that there isn't any grit in my chain. And you can kind of hear it if there is. This bike is my demonstration bike at this point, so this chain is pretty good. But it kind of has a nice like smooth sound to it. Once it gets gritty or dry, you'll hear a difference. It'll just it'll sound different. So if you notice that if you've ridden in like damp conditions, like if you were riding today, you would get home and there'd be a lot of stuff stuck to it. That's a great indication that it's time to clean your chain. Again, you can do just soap and get in there with like a toothbrush and really make sure that you get all that sand and salt out of there, dry it with a towel, and then you put chain lubricant on it. So to put chain lubricant, I do basically all of my maintenance with my bike upside down. You can also get a bike stand if you want, but so I would have, I actually do have some chain lubricant here. See if I can make it over and back along the boards. So you can get, there are all different varieties of lubricant. I just, this is happens to be a wet chain lubricant. They make dry as well. So when I am putting oil on my chain, I'll hold the lubricant at an angle, put it right on the chain, squeeze just so it's a steady stream, and I'm just going to bring the chain around, I don't know, maybe 5-10 times, and then I just let it sit. So you want the lubricant to get inside all of those little crevices and make your chain nice and lubricated that way. So I let it sit for at least 2 minutes. A lot of times I'll do this first, and then I'll pump up my tires and do other stuff and come back. After that few minutes, I just get a cloth. I wrap it around the chain, and I do the same exact thing, because you don't want to leave any lubricant on the outside of your chain, because it'll act like glue, and everything from the road will then stick to your chain. So we don't want to do that. You really just want the lube on the inside of the chain. So don't be shy about really getting as much as you possibly can off of there. So other things, let me move my stuff here. So removing a wheel. In a perfect world, if you got a flat, it would always be in the front, because then you don't have to deal with all the stuff in the back, right? But you know, as luck would have it, sometimes the back gets a flat too. So basically, see how I can best. So this bike has a quick release axle, and I'd say the majority of bikes have that. Sometimes they also have a through axle, which is a thicker axle. Those are a little different, but so if you have a quick release, you're just going to flip open and then hold one side, and then you just loosen here. So that's the first step. The other thing you need to do to get your wheel off the bike with the caliper style brakes is you need to disengage your brakes. Otherwise, they're not going to let the wheel come out. So there's just a lever here that will pull the brakes apart. So that's important to remember, because after you do everything, you want to make sure you engage them again. So you disengage the brakes, you loosen the axle, and then the next step will be to get the wheel off the bike. So what I do is I take a finger and I pull this back. So I pull this back. And then it kind of pops the wheel right out. You may get your hands a little dirty, but so now we have the wheel off the bike. Obviously, if you do it in the front, you just loosen the quick release, and then you can disengage the brakes and pull the wheel off. So since we have the wheel off the bike, let's change the flat tire. So if you get a flat tire on the road, you really want to figure out why. If you don't, it's okay, but it's better to know if there's something sharp that can potentially puncture the new tube that you put in here. So in this case, this is a demonstration bike, and this tire does have a cut in it here. So that would be a pretty good indication to me that, you know, maybe I ran over a shell or a piece of glass or something like that. We just want to make sure that there isn't any on the inside that'll cause more trouble in the future. So first step is, even if you have a flat, still make sure that you let the rest of the air out. I've made that mistake before, trying to get the tire off the rim and there's still air in the tube. Doesn't make for an easy time. So now we have a true flat tire. We've kind of taken a little peek around to see if we can determine why this happened. And our next job is to get the tire off the rim. So then we'll go into our flat kit. We'll grab our tire levers. And basically you want to use your tire lever like a scoop to get under the edge of your tire and bring it over the rim. So if you want to do advanced flat tire changing, you actually use your tire lever and hook it right on your spoke. That way you have an extra hand, so to speak. So then you take your other tire lever a little bit farther down, and then you do the same scoop. And sometimes if you put your tire lever on your spoke, it creates a little too much tension and it's hard to get the second one in. So in that case, maybe get your second one in before you hook it. Now we have two tire levers in here, and sometimes you can kind of cheat a little and just scoot this second tire lever around. If that's not the case, that's okay. You just take tire lever off and then scoot down a little bit more, and then you try to wheel the tire over the rim. So I'm just pushing the lever around the rim here. Don't worry about my old tire. I'll shed in a little bit. All right, so that's the first step. Now we have to get the back side off the rim. If you are confident about why you have a flat, maybe you don't take the whole tire off. You can just take your tube out and put a new one in. But if I'm going to go through all the effort of doing this, I want to really make sure there's nothing in here that's going to cause a flat right away when I put my new tube in. So I go with the safer version, which is to take everything fully apart. It would be very frustrating to do all this and then immediately get another flat. So same rules apply. I'm scooping the back edge of the tire off. Sometimes, like I said, you can kind of scoot this around to get the tire off the rim. Right. So now we have all these pieces. So your tube, we'll just put that off to the side. The tire, I'm gonna find where that little cut was. So it's right here. I'm gonna look on the other side and see if there's anything in there. I'm gonna also do a little visual inspection, see if I can find any debris in here. Try to avoid the, checking with your fingers, because if there's glass in here, you don't want to find it that way. If you have like a cloth or a rag with you, that would be a good thing to do. If you have a set pair of like gloves, maybe you use that, just to make sure there's nothing in here that will give you a flat. The other thing you can do is you can kind of check on your rim in a very rare circumstance. Sometimes your rim tape can be compromised, and maybe you have a puncture from one of your spokes coming through. I'd say that's a rare scenario, but worth a try. So let's say you find or you don't find the cause of your flat. It's time to get everything back together again. So typically you would replace with a new tube, but since this one wasn't truly flat, we'll put it back on here. So our first goal is to get the back edge of the tire over the rim. And then you'll get to a point where you probably need to bring the tire levers back into play here. So I'm just doing like a little scoop here. All right, so our back edge is over the rim. Now we have to get our tube in place. So put that right through. And something I forgot to mention is if you're putting a new tube in, before you feed it into your tire, it's helpful to put a few puffs of air in it so it holds its form. If you don't, it can be a little challenging to get it to stay in place. So since I have a bike pump right here, and it doesn't have to be a lot of air, just enough so that you're not dealing with a completely flat tire or tube. All right. So now I'm just going to try to get this to stay right in the tire here. And as I do that, I'm bringing the second side of the tire over the rim, being sure that I'm not pinching the new tube between the tire and the rim. So I'm just pushing up into the tire. So I'm just using my tire lever to kind of guide things over. Now you'll notice that as I bring one end over, sometimes the other will start to come off as well. So you can kind of pinch the tire against the ground to hold it in place. Or if you are feeling comfortable with it, you can just hold one side and kind of scoop over with the other. Again, just being mindful that you're not pinching your tube over the rim.
What do you mean by pinching the tube over the rim?
So you just don't want your tube to
Spill out over the.
to pinch between this tight edge of the tire and the sharp edge of the rim.
Okay.
What can happen is it can just sort of puncture.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
And just kind of doing a scooping motion. As I scoop over, I'm just holding on the other side so that it doesn't come off. And sometimes you're lucky, you can just grab it and bring it over. So now we put everything back into place, but I like to just do a little check before I put air in it to make sure that the tube isn't sticking out between the tire and the rim. So you can literally just pull to the side here and take a check. And you do all the way around one side, all the way around the other side. If you are using a pump to air up your tires again and not, or actually if you have a CO2 cartridge that has like an on-off switch, I'd say even put a little more air in and then check again. If you put more air in the tire, you should be able to see, like if the tube is sticking out, you'll see like a little indent, chances are. But I would do at least a thorough visual check before you put all the air in so that you don't get a pinch flat. And that's just the tube getting squished against the rim. But for the sake of demonstration, you know, we've aired the tire back up and now it's time to get it back in place here. So we're just going to do the reverse of what we did before. Makes it a little trickier because we're trying to line it up here. But basically, I'm just going to, it doesn't matter where on your cassette you put the chain. I usually just aim for the middle to make it easy on myself. And then for me, visually to guide the wheel into place, I'm watching the wheel go between the brakes, the caliper brakes, and that should position it in place for me. So I'm going to push down and aim that wheel right between those brakes. And that gets me close. And then I'm just pulling back on the axle to seat it right into place here. And this, I didn't loosen it enough, so I have to wiggle it a little bit, but now we're back in place there. Here. So a little tip about how tight to make your quick release here. I have seen a lot of bikes where this is so tight and it doesn't really need to be. So let's see if I can. So basically, you want your quick release lever to be tight so that when you close it, it leaves an indent in your hand, but nothing more than that. It doesn't have to be as tight as you can possibly get it. It just needs to be enough to hold your wheel in place here. So the little indent is kind of a quick and easy way to just make sure that you have enough tension on it. And then the other thing we need to make sure is that we engage our brakes again. So just flipping that switch and then, you know, giving a little spin to make sure everything, you know, we'll try to figure out what gear it was in. So there it goes. And then just making sure that everything's lined up there. Sometimes in this process, your brakes can kind of rotate a little bit. So you may feel like you're dragging a brake on one side. In some cases, you can just grab the whole brake system and rotate it with your hand a little bit. If that's not the case, then there are some ways to just fix it on your own. But if you're not confident with it, I just bring it to the bike shop and they can quickly take a wrench to it and put it back where it belongs. But especially if you're putting your bike in and out of the back of a car to transport it, it's very easy for these to move. So that's actually a good segue into the ABCs of what I do before I hop on my bike. So let me get these out of my way. All right, so if we think about the ABCs of the checklist to do before you ride your bike, air, so that would be attaching your pump, making sure that you're going in accordance with whatever is on your sidewall here. Brakes. So what I do is I squeeze one side of my brakes and I try to push the bike forward. If the bike isn't going, that means that your brakes are working on that side. And I do the same thing on the other. So that's the B. Now the C is the chain. We talked about that, but just making sure that your chain is on the ring, that it sounds okay when your bike is moving or when your wheel is spinning. And that's really what I do for my ABC check. I would say the only other thing as part of the brake check is I just spin a wheel to make sure that nothing is dragging. And if it is, like I said, you can just grab this part and rotate, chances are. If not, then just bring it to the shop. So that really covers kind of the basics of what to do before you hop on the bike. You know, of course, other things, make sure that your lights, the batteries are charged, or you have fresh batteries in there. But that pretty much covers that stuff. Are any questions about all of that? No.
Until you do it.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. And that's a good point. So if you have not taken the tire off your bike before, it can feel really sticky to separate the tire from the rim. That's completely normal. You're not ruining your bike. It's never been done before, so it's had plenty of time to sit in place. So sometimes it's helpful to just kind of get in and loosen up a little bit before you try to take the tire off. And then the other side of that is when you put air back in the tire, sometimes you'll hear like a flicking or a popping, and it's not in most cases that you're popping your tube. It's that the edge of your tire is actually just reseating in your wheel, so on your rim. So don't be alarmed about that. If you pop a tire, chances are it'll be a fairly loud occurrence. So you'll know, and I mean, of course, if it's not holding air, then you'll know that you popped the tube. But yeah, so some amount of difficulty getting the wheel off for the first time, and then noise when you're putting it back on is fairly normal. And I do encourage you to try to do this at home in a low stress environment before you have to do it out in the wild. You know, you can watch someone do it as many times as you'd like, but until you're actually doing it and figuring out how the tire levers best work for you and how, you know, to manipulate your bike, it's, you know, it's very helpful to get a few practice runs under your belt. And that way, you know, if you're home and you just can't get the darn tire back on, throw it in the car and find, you know, the nearest bike shop and they can put it back on for you. But yeah, so definitely get some practice in for sure. So that's it in a nutshell. I think that's also the end of my slides here. Yeah, so here's my contact information. I do have cards over there, and I actually brought cards that have a cheat sheet for the various steps to change a flat tire on the table.
Good.
And also I did have a sign in. So if you want to sign in either online or on the clipboard, I will email you the notes from class so you have those. And as a thank you for coming to class, I'd be happy to offer you a discount on Bike Fit. So I'll email you that stuff as well.
Oh, good.
So there aren't any other questions.
Are there any hints if the chain comes off?
Let's see.
I mean, is it best to tip the bike upside down like you
Yeah,
haven't?
Yeah, and then, you know, it's just a matter of, you know, getting your hands dirty and putting it back in place.
Yeah.
I mean, you can always put, you know, some tissues or a glove in your flat kit bag.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a matter of, you know, placing it on wherever it needs to go and giving it a good spin. You may have to kind of fiddle with it forward or back a little bit,
Yeah.
but it should jump back into place.
Okay,
If you're dropping the chain a lot, it can mean the chain itself is stretched out. So if you bring the bike to the bike shop for a tune-up, they should check the chain to make sure it's not stretched out.
okay,
Every so many years or so many miles, it does need to be replaced. The other thing is if you're dropping your chain a lot, it can be that you're shifting at a time that isn't great for the bike. So you want to shift, I say shift early and often, so you don't want to shift when, you know, you're halfway up the hill and you can't go anymore. You want to try to maintain a pretty steady pedal stroke. And that's, you know, the best thing for your drivetrain and your legs. So, you know, if you see a hill coming, shift in advance when you're moving, so that way you're not trying to move your chain gear to gear when there's a lot of tension on it.
yeah,
So,
makes sense.
yeah, good question. Anything else? No? All right, great.
Great, thank you very much.
No,